She just wanted a peaceful dinner. Laura Barajas, 40, a devoted mother and full-time caregiver, wasn't looking for excitement that ordinary night in San Jose, California. She didn't go out to a fancy restaurant. She didn't travel to some far-off place. All she did was cook a piece of fish at home, a simple tilapia bought from a local market. Days later, she had lost her arm and one of her legs. What happened between those two moments is a story that haunts doctors, defies logic, and raises a terrifying question. How far can an invisible organism go in destroying a life? Laura's tragedy began quietly. A little pain here, a fever there. What seemed like the flu quickly turned into something unimaginable. By the time she was admitted to the hospital, the infection had taken over. Her skin was darkening. Her organs were shutting down. All because of something she put on her plate. Have you ever heard of Vibrio vulnificus? It's a rare bacterium, deadly, and it could be hiding in your next undercooked meal, especially contaminated seafood. But Laura had no idea. How could she? She wasn't a doctor. She was just one of millions who cook fish at home every day. This isn't a story meant to scare you. It's a warning. A harsh glimpse into what can happen when the enemy is microscopic and merciless. If stories like this intrigue you, and if you want to understand how something so ordinary can turn into a surgical nightmare, hit that subscribe button. But brace yourself. What you're about to hear challenges modern medicine, exposes flaws in our food safety systems, and forces us to ask a question no one wants to face. What if it had been you at that dinner? It was a humid Thursday evening in San Jose, and Laura Barajas was exhausted. Working as a caregiver demanded more than just physical strength. It required constant presence, infinite patience, and a heart ready to handle the unexpected. But that late afternoon, all she wanted was a simple, nutritious, no-fuss dinner. On a quick trip to the local market, she picked up some vegetables, rice, and a piece of raw tilapia. The tilapia was packaged, looked fresh, and had been recommended by a fishmonger as, quote, a good choice for grilling. Laura headed home, unrushed. She washed the ingredients and seasoned them the way she'd done since she was a little girl: lemon, salt, garlic, and a touch of dried herbs. She turned on the stove, heated up the pan, and let the smell fill the kitchen. The sizzling sound of fish hitting hot oil brought a sense of normalcy. It was the kind of meal that reconnected her with everyday life. She ate alone that night. Sitting on the couch in the living room, watching a rerun of a show she barely paid attention to. The food was tasty, juicy, hot on the outside, but maybe not enough on the inside. The first symptoms appeared the next day. It started with mild nausea, then stomach pain. Laura figured she might have overeaten or picked up a stomach bug. She drank some water, lay down for a bit, and tried to rest. But within 24 hours, things took a much darker turn. She developed a high fever, intense shivering, and, even more alarming, dark spots started appearing on her skin. First on her legs, then her arms. Her fingertips felt numb. Her body was reacting to something she couldn't understand. That's when her partner, Mario, called emergency services. By the time the paramedics arrived, Laura was semi-conscious. Her breathing was shallow. Her heartbeat was irregular. What had seemed like a common illness had now entered unknown and terrifying territory. At the hospital, the team rushed to stabilize her. They put her on a ventilator, started IV antibiotics, ran blood tests, cultures, CT scans. But results would take hours, and Laura didn't have hours. Doctors suspected sepsis, a widespread infection in the blood, but the source wasn't clear. Even with the strongest antibiotics available, her body kept shutting down. The purple patches were spreading. In some areas her skin looked lifeless. Her heart would race, then crash. Her body trembled, even under sedation. Then one doctor, reviewing her recent history, asked the key question: "Did she eat any seafood recently?" Mario hesitated. "Yes, tilapia, yesterday. Bought it nearby." The hospital sent her blood for emergency genetic testing. A hypothesis was forming, rare but possible. A name most doctors had barely seen in action, and rarely with this level of devastation. And while the tests were still processing, time kept slipping away. Every passing minute meant more dead cells, more damaged tissue, a higher risk of death. One ordinary dinner had triggered a silent, invisible war that no one saw coming. And it was only just beginning. At San Jose General Hospital, the isolation room where Laura Barajas was admitted felt more like a silent war zone. Monitors beeped erratically. Nurses came and went with tense expressions. Laura's once vibrant body now lay motionless on a hospital bed, surrounded by tubes, catheters, and machines fighting to maintain the basics: breathing, circulation, life. The test results began to come in, and the numbers were alarming. Her liver was failing. So were her kidneys. Her blood pressure was crashing. Her white blood cell count, the body's natural defense army, was at a critically low level. Everything pointed to an extremely aggressive infection. But what kind? While the doctors scrambled to identify the source, Mario, Laura's partner, found himself trapped in a surreal reality. Just 24 hours earlier, she had been smiling in the kitchen. Now, doctors were talking about preventative amputation. The damage to her limbs was worsening by the hour. Her fingers had turned dark with no circulation. Her arms and legs showed visible signs of necrosis, the death of living tissue. Her blackened skin resembled deep burns, but it was something else. Something coming from within. That's when a name finally appeared in the lab results. Vibrio vulnificus. A technical name, hard to pronounce, but capable of destroying a human body in just a few hours. This bacterium thrives in warm, salty water, particularly in raw or undercooked seafood. It's rare. But when it enters the body of someone with a weakened immune system, like Laura, who had been on medication that suppressed her immunity, the bacteria doesn't just infect. It devours. Vibrio vulnificus is sometimes called the flesh-eating bacteria by doctors. But it's not like in horror movies. It's not loud or theatrical. It's quiet, fast, and precise. Inside the body, it enters the bloodstream and releases toxins that kill tissue. The immune system tries to fight back, but it can't keep up. In severe cases, the only way to save the patient is to surgically remove the infected areas before they kill the rest of the body. Laura knew none of this. She was sedated, unconscious. The decision now fell to Mario, standing before the doctors. If we don't amputate, she may not survive the next 24 hours, one of the surgeons said, his voice steady. It's our only chance. Mario's world crumbled in silence. How do you choose to save someone by giving up parts so vital? How do you explain to a young child that their mother may wake up without an arm, without a leg, and that this is the best-case scenario? He gave his consent. The surgeries began in the early hours of the morning. First, her left arm, then her right leg. The most severely affected limbs. The necrosis had already advanced farther than expected, and every minute demanded extreme surgical precision. When the doctors finished, Laura was alive, but permanently changed. When she woke up days later, she didn't yet know what she had lost, nor what she had survived. And in many ways, the battle was far from over. When Laura Barajas finally opened her eyes, everything was blurry. The white ceiling lights, the muffled sounds of the machines, the strange feeling of a body that no longer felt like hers. For a few seconds, she tried to move her fingers, but they didn't respond. Neither did her arm, nor her right leg. Mario was by her side, holding her hand with a gentleness that hurt. His face said more than any words ever could. "You're alive, Laura, but we had to make some very hard decisions." The silence between them was an abyss. There weren't enough words, and not nearly enough time to process it all. The doctors explained everything slowly and clearly. The Vibrio vulnificus bacterium had likely entered her system through the undercooked tilapia she ate. Her immune system, already weakened from recent immunosuppressant treatment, couldn't fight back. The bacteria didn't just multiply, it destroyed. cell by cell. First soft tissue, then blood vessels, then nerves. It's a progression few people understand until they witness it up close. The infection spreads in hours, not days, hours. In many cases, patients die before a diagnosis is even made. In Laura's case, quick emergency care and the doctor's decision to amputate had saved her life. But the cost was unimaginable. Her left arm had been amputated above the elbow, her right leg above the knee. She required breathing support and was being fed through a tube. There would be months, maybe years of rehabilitation ahead, physical therapy, prosthetics, psychological support. Nothing would ever be the same again. And all of this because of a piece of fish. The doctors explained that while rare, Vibrio vulnificus is becoming more common in certain coastal regions, especially as global temperatures rise. The bacteria thrive in warm, salty water, and contaminated seafood can appear completely normal at first glance. In the United States, it's estimated that about 80,000 people are infected with Vibrio species each year. Of those, hundreds develop severe complications, and a small but brutal number result in death or amputation. Laura never imagined she'd become part of that statistic. She hadn't traveled, swum in contaminated water, or done anything out of the ordinary. She had simply cooked fish, like millions of people do every single day. She spent weeks in the hospital, fighting off secondary infections, learning to breathe on her own again, facing pain that went far beyond the physical. Her mind, once strong and focused, now swung between gratitude for being alive and fear of the new body she inhabited. Her young son visited her with cautious eyes. Mario did everything he could to keep hope alive. But there were questions with no answers, invisible guilt, and countless sleepless nights. And then there was the name, Vibrio vulnificus. It sounded like a code, a monster hiding behind sterile syllables. But Laura now knew what that name truly meant. It meant fear, it meant loss, it meant an entire life redrawn. And even there, lying in bed, surrounded by doctors and machines, she understood one thing with absolute clarity. The road back, if it even existed, would be long. But she also knew something else. She was alive, and somehow that was still a miracle. Nothing could have prepared her for the moment she saw her own body for the first time. The doctors had been honest. The psychology team had done their best to prepare her. Mario had tried to soften the truth with gentle words. But no theoretical explanation could replace the shock of the real image. Her left arm ended in a bandage. So did her right leg. There were wounds, stitches, tubes, and scars. But what hurt the most was the absence. Laura cried, not from physical pain, but from a silent grief. A mourning for herself, for the woman she had been before that seemingly ordinary night in the kitchen. The questions came in waves. How will I hold my son? How will I work? How will I still be me? And at the center of it all, a question too cruel to speak out loud. Would it have been better if I had died? The physical recovery was brutal, but the emotional wounds bled the longest. Each visit to the mirror was a battle. Each attempt to sit up on her own was a harsh reminder. Every simple act, reaching for a glass, trying to brush her hair, became an impossible task. The medical team continued to do everything right. Surgeons monitored the grafts. Physical therapists began the slow work of teaching her body all over again. Occupational therapists brought adaptive tools. Psychologists sat quietly, waiting for Laura to open up, but she didn't want to speak. Not yet. Mario, meanwhile, became everything. Caregiver, nurse, father, and living hope. He smiled through exhaustion, slept in a chair next to her bed, brought their son to visit. Even when the child's eyes asked questions, his mouth couldn't form. Then, one day, Mario gathered his courage. "You're still here, Laura, and we are too. That has to mean something." She didn't answer right away, but she heard him. And a few days later, when the doctors suggested the next step, prosthetic adaptation, she finally said, "Let's try." It was the beginning of a new chapter. The adjustment wasn't fast or easy. Prosthetics are uncomfortable at first, often painful. They require training, strength, and a kind of patience few people ever experience. But Laura showed resilience. Step by step, first with parallel bars, then with mechanical assistance, she began reclaiming fragments of her independence. She learned to feed herself, to brush her teeth with her other hand, to laugh, even if timidly, at her small victories. There were still setbacks, moments of anger, shame, sadness. But now there was also something new, a desire to live, not by denying the pain, but despite it. Laura began receiving visits from other patients in rehabilitation. She shared her story, explained the bacteria, the diagnosis, what she felt, and in each conversation she found another small piece of herself. She wasn't just the woman who lost her arm and leg from eating fish. She was the woman who survived, who chose to keep going. And maybe, just maybe, that was more powerful than anything she had lost. The halls of the rehabilitation center smelled of alcohol, stale coffee, and hope. Laura now walked with the help of a partial prosthesis. Her left arm had been replaced with a functional mechanical limb, her right leg with a device that demanded balance and courage. Every step was deliberate, conscious, often painful. But it was a step. She still dreamed of what she had lost. Sometimes she woke up with the phantom sensation of her arm itching. Other times she felt her leg as if it were still there. The doctors called it phantom pain. But to her, it was more than pain. It was memory, absence with form. The emotional scar, though, was the slowest to heal. Outside, life looked unchanged. The supermarket where she bought the tilapia was still open. People kept buying fish, unaware of the risk. And Laura tried not to feel angry. She tried not to drown in the what-ifs. What if she had cooked it longer? What if she had bought it somewhere else? What if she had eaten something different? But those thoughts only dragged her back into the pain. And she was trying to move forward. One day, sitting in the medical center's garden, she noticed a little girl staring at her prosthesis with curiosity. The child wasn't afraid. She wasn't judging. Just wide-eyed and inquisitive. "Are you a robot?" the girl asked. Laura smiled. "A little." And in that moment she felt something new. Not gratitude, not resignation, but a flicker of strength. She had survived something few ever face. She had crossed through it. And she was alive to tell the tale. Laura began sharing her story in online groups, amputee support forums, and awareness campaigns about Vibrio vulnificus. Her experience became both a warning and a symbol of hope. She learned that surviving is more than just breathing. It's about rebuilding what can be rebuilt. And accepting what will never return. The scar on her body was now a line of fire, a line that said, "This happened, but I am still here." Laura survived. But what exactly did she survive? An invisible bacterium, an ordinary night, a plate of fish that seemed completely harmless. She lost parts of herself, literally. But within what remained, she discovered a strength that no one, not even she, knew existed. Today, she lives with scars. She doesn't hide them. They're part of her story, part of the warning she now shares with the world. Because the truth is, this could happen to anyone, to you, to someone you love. All it takes is a moment of carelessness, an undercooked piece of fish, an opportunistic organism waiting for its chance. So now I ask you, what if you were the one lying in that hospital bed? If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. There are still cases out there that defy medicine and reveal just how fragile and, at the same time, extraordinary we truly are.